Hey guys, we are live at Farragut Square in DC at the People's March, getting ready to go to Lincoln Memorial, where it's expected that tens of thousands of protesters will be engaging in a rally to protest the Trump administration. So stay tuned with us. Why did you feel like it was important to show up today?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling concerned. We've got an administration and really an entire federal government that's going to be controlled by a party that has been extremely transphobic, that is anti-climate, that is anti-LGBTQIA, that it talks about drastic increase of funding the police, that is talking about genocide of Palestinians. It's a lot of issues that to me are unacceptable. And while I don't believe that the Democrats have necessarily addressed those problems the way that they should, I think we see this new administration is going to be even worse. And that's scary.
So when it comes to sending a message, we had the Women's March in 2016, largest march of its time at that time, and we still went through 4 years of his administration. He's doubling down on his fascist ideology. What do you hope this message sends to his administration?
I think you hear them talk about how they're like this silent majority, and I think it's important to remind them that they may have won this election, but they barely won the popular vote, and a lot of people stayed home. And just because people stayed home and they won this election doesn't mean that everyone agrees with what they want to do. There are people who will stand up for what they believe in and push back against the stuff that they push.
The last question. You mentioned the Democrats. There has been some criticism even of this protest today by some Democrats who feel that their party leaders haven't really done enough to stand up to Trump and to even push when they had the power. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's exactly right. I think a part of the reason we end up with a fascist like Trump in office is because Democrats talk about issues that people care about and then don't address the root causes. So they talk about how people can't afford things, how they can't afford food, and then they don't fix those issues. They turn around and say, actually, our priority is to ban TikTok. Our priority is to give money to Israel, while people here, their issues are unaddressed completely. And that leaves the door open for someone like Trump to say, I'm going to lower the cost of your groceries, when we know he's not going to do that.
What were your thoughts, as an HBCU student, when, Kamala Harris was expected to win, and then she had to come out and give that conciliatory speech?
Mm-hmm. I was kind of torn with just Kamala Harris in general. Still siding with very liberalistic viewpoints and not kind of doing things that people, especially people of color, people who are backing her, support, like supporting Palestine, like supporting more initiatives to increase affordability when people can't afford to just survive nowadays. I was kind of torn, but at the same time, it was a letdown because now we have Trump, which is, I guess, I'm scared.
A lot of the criticism has come against Democrats too for not doing enough, and you talked about how these liberal policies that don't really solve the issues. Mm-hmm. What would your message be to Democrats over the next 4 years? What do you want them to do?
I would say to Democrats, maybe listen to your constituents more. I think a lot of people are recognizing slowly a little bit over time that the Democratic Party is not working as it once was, or maybe as they thought it once was. It's not representing the people in which they support them. And then you have people like me who was registered as a Democrat kind of not being able to identify themselves as one now and looking outside of the Democratic Party for answers because they're not giving them.
Last question.
Yes.
You just found out that Snoop Dogg and Nelly will be performing for Trump at the inauguration. What are your thoughts?
I have no words. Snoop was just at the Paris Olympics. I thought he was doing a cute little tour. I didn't think it was going to be to Trump's rally or inauguration. I'm let down because they both are really big leaders or representations of our community, and just any type of representation further of us supporting Trump, especially when you already have the black male vote increasing for Trump, it's really a big letdown. It's a huge letdown.
Why was it important for your organization to come out here and to make your voices heard here today?
It was important for the YCL to come out here today because right now in this country, what we're dealing with is a fascist movement. exemplified by MAGA, exemplified by Donald Trump, and exemplified by their Project 2025 agenda. And so we're out here today as progressive young people who care about democracy, who care about peace, and who want to build a mass movement for socialism in this country. And we're here with the message that we care about our freedom because that's about our future. And we're here to tell Donald Trump, we're here to tell the MAGA movement, we're here to tell his billionaire friends that we are not going back.
You know, a lot of the talking points from the far right side is that communism is a threat to our country, socialism is a threat to our country, and yet it's the fascist actions that have caused such division. So what's your thoughts about that?
My thought about that is that they call everything progressive and fair in this country, from labor rights to civil rights, communism, socialism, for a reason. They're scared of progress, and they know that when we come together and we present ourselves as a mass and united movement, their fascist agenda cannot be advanced. So we're out here today to let people know that the strongest weapon that we have as working class people in the fight against fascism is our unity.
You know, Democrats have been at odds with the progressive wing of their party for a while too, and there's a lot of criticism that the Democrats haven't gone far enough when they had power to stand up to these fascist actions. What are your thoughts about what you think the Democrats should be doing over the next 4 years, or independents, other parties, opposition in general?
I think you kind of put it very clearly. Right now, the Democratic Party, the liberals, they're kind of spineless. They're not willing to actually lead the fight against fascism. And so we, as the working class, as working class people, we have to come together and we have to take up the fight against fascism. We can't just sit out on the sidelines while our people's rights are under attack, while our people's standards of living are under attack. So as progressives, as communists, we have to get in the forefront of the fight for democracy and really position ourselves as people who say, we are going to take the fight to fascism, to Donald Trump, to his billionaire friends, and to the MAGA movement.
So we are still here at Farragut Square, where, as you can see, another march is converging onto this one. There's going to be a total of 3 marches joined together, where we'll all be heading to Lincoln Memorial for today's rally here at the People's March in D.C. So we are at the People's March in D.C., where 2 different protests have just converged. Tens of thousands of people are estimated to be out here right now. We're about to march to Lincoln Memorial for a rally from 1 to 3, where people are making their voices heard, sending a message to the Trump administration that they, want people to know that not everyone supported his presidency, and that they are going to stand up to him over the next 4 years.
Peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice!
Don't let it do that. I remember how much they yard. It's on the yard. It's on the yard.
We are now converging on the National Mall. As you can see behind me, the protest is crossing Constitution Avenue. We're at the spot where Trump was set to have his inauguration on Monday, but it's since been moved inside due to the weather. But as you can see, people from all ages, all backgrounds have braved the cold today to send a message to his administration that they won't back down. Why was it important for you to come here today, and what message do you plan to give to the people today?
Bottom line, this is our government, right? It doesn't matter that we didn't support Donald Trump. It doesn't matter that one election passed or another. The bottom line is that the Constitution, democracy, this nation, it all belongs to the people. And so it is not only our right, but our duty to call the question. Donald Trump is very clearly trying to death by 1,000 paper cuts, our protections, the Constitution, democracy. You go on. And so, again, I find it's our duty. I'm glad to see that many agree with me.
What are the main issues that you focus on at Popular Democracy, and what are you wanting the people to really stand up against under this new administration?
Yeah, well, Popular Democracy is a network of 50 organizations across the country who knock on doors 365 days a year. And the message that we have is that there are 93 weeks until midterm elections. The Congress is held on by the skin of its teeth. And we have the power to not only upend the worst of Donald Trump, but we have the power to course correct. So we are urging people already. We're already on doors, knocking on doors, telling folks, we have to vote. 90 million stayed home. 90 million cannot stay home next time. There's also state races that are going to show the tone and tenor of what our nation is willing to accept. And finally, and this may get a little wonky for some listeners, but you know, we are in fact fighting for what is at the core and what is acceptable from our government. We are pulling the Overton window back towards justice, back towards a government that centers people over capital. Right now, we know that folks like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they've captured our government. I mean, there's no other way to describe it when one tweet can undo elected officials' plans, and we, the people, have to stop it.
A lot of criticism has come against the Democrats for what some people feel was not fighting hard enough to stand up against fascism. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that we, the people, we should not be focused on the left or the right. For me, I'm from the bottom. And what I'm trying to do is lift people who are at the margins to bring them to the center of policymaking. When I hear both Democrats and Republicans talking about deporting millions of people and not caring about human decency, their children who are documented citizens, or even just the Constitution, then that's not a left or right issue. When I hear Donald Trump say that he's going to dismantle the Department of Education, that's not left, that's not right, that's not Democrat, that's Republican, that's us. And so it is so, one of the things that we as a community experience is that they try to put us in a box, but we reject it. I mean, bottom line, I am here for maybe the same reason so many are. My children, I believe in this country, I believe in freedom, and I believe that I have a right to determine what happens to me and my body, just like a man does. And I'm willing to fight for it, so.
Last question. What do you have to say to people who have already kind of felt like they've given up, they're hopeless? I mean, we've just heard that on Tuesday, Trump is planning to send hundreds of agents into Chicago to round people up. How do you have hope at a time like this?
I know that organizing has got us out of this kind of situation. This isn't new. Every single time Black people gains political power in this country, we have experienced a clapback. Think about the moment of emancipation and Reconstruction. And then after 12 years, what happens? A deal gets cut between the party of Lincoln and the party of Dixie. And they strike a deal that ends up bringing us 100 years of Jim Crow. Think about what happens after the Civil Rights Movement, where we rise up and we demand rights. And what happens? The war on drugs, the war on our communities, the racism that resurges under Reagan, under Bush, and frankly, even under Bill Clinton. So every single time we reach for power, right? Status quo tries to pull it back. It does not escape me that this country was built and founded on the idea of freedom, and then they hardwired it to only exist for land-owning white men, and we've been pulling it ever since. And that is not going to stop, and I'm here for it.
So can you first of all tell me why you're here and the message you plan to give today?
You know, last week was a tough week for Sierra Club. We woke up on Monday to being sued by Exxon, and we ended last Friday being bullied online by Elon Musk. This is a time for us to remind our colleagues in the movement that we can't afford to be bullied, whether it's by one of the most powerful companies on the planet or the biggest troll on Twitter. This is a time for us to find ways to keep moving forward, keep making progress in our communities, in our states, and even with this Congress. Last time Trump was in office, we beat him hundreds of times in court. We forced his most corrupt nominees to resign. And we even found bipartisan allies to get big pieces of legislation passed. It's time to remind us, in other words, that our agenda is more popular than either party or the president of the United States. and we'll move this country forward with or without him.
What do you want the people to understand?
Well, the people to understand is that most of us now are living in communities that have been deindustrialized, where folks have been economically stuck. And yet, in the last 4 years, we've seen America do something that you and I haven't seen in our adult lifetimes, which is to open up big new factories to pursue big new industrial opportunities. Virtually all of that is centered around the so-called green economy, which is really just the future economy of this country. Those are factories to build EVs, to build batteries, to re-onshore microchips, to build wind turbines and solar panels and all the component parts. And the reality is that that's the biggest economic opportunity on planet Earth right now, the need to change the way the whole Earth is powered and everything is transported around it. The country that seizes that will lead the world economy in this century. If we want that to be America again, like it was last century, then we have to find a way to keep building factories, keep creating jobs for our neighbors, no matter what the sort of partisan rhetoric of the president of the United States is. And what makes me hopeful is that most of those jobs are being created in red states like Oklahoma and Texas. In other words, he's going to hit resistance in his own party. And we saw that, literally several 100,000 new jobs in green factories have been created. And those create multipliers in the economy just in the last 4 years. And despite all that, Vice President Vance referred to it as table scraps. And people came roaring back from inside his own party because a lot of those factory workers are Republicans too. And they know that those jobs are better than the last job and solving real problems for their families. And they're not going to let anybody, even, the vice president who represents their own party, destroy the economy that's solving their families' struggles. So, that's, bottom line, why we're here. We, as Sierra Club, we show up in lots of different corners. We seek to maintain an uncomfortably large coalition that includes Democrats, includes Republicans, includes a lot of independents, but all of them committed to making sure our country does everything it can to preserve more parkland and to build the technologies that will reduce carbon emissions so we can stabilize this climate. And what that all adds up to is a bunch of new jobs. And that's part of why we fight so hard.
A lot of people are here feeling hopeless, but you just expressed the possibilities of what can still be done.
Yeah.
Why do you think people are feeling hopeless, and what do you hope can come out of the efforts you're doing with the Sierra Club?
America lags behind most modern nations in never having had a woman president. And the fact that we were so close again and yet failed to deliver that change for our country, people are right, to feel disappointed. My grandma was so proud of her mother who was a suffragette, and her, grandma who was a suffragette, and she knew both of them, and they helped raise her. And so for my sister, for my mother, for my dad, for me, for anybody who's been part of that multi-generational struggle to kind of help women break through the political glass ceiling, to feel a bit of disappointment is rational. And yet, we have a responsibility that no matter, how many steps we get pushed back, we still got to find a way to leap forward. And the working people of this country, those of us who have the privilege to lead in some way, only have one job, which is to deliver real change in real time for real people with real struggles. And so I can't look at them and say, there's nothing we can do, because I know there's so much we can do. And so in moments like that, you got 3 minutes to talk or whatever, you focus on what we can do together. And that's what I keep talking to folks about, because you need them to, oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, we've been through this. Oh, we didn't just survive, we did better.
So back in 2017, we made history. And today we are here to make our future. That's right. Today we have a choice to accept a future that is forced on us, or to fight for the future that we want.
And a future that is what? Compassionate, joy-filled, just, democratic, a future that is free.
And we know it has been a lot these past 8 years, right? Now think about it. We've had Donald Trump. We've had wildfires, floods, wars, inflation, recession, pandemic, the gutting of Roe, Donald Trump, shootings, deportations, police brutality, Charlottesville, Donald Trump. And all of those things have been covered with the fingerprints of the billionaires who want to own our government. I'm not gonna hold you. In a democracy, there is no greater threat. But here's the thing. Today isn't about any of them. Today is about us.
And folks keep asking, what is this march? What are we marching for? Who is this march for? And that's it. At the People's March, we are calling out the people who use power to strip our freedoms. We are calling in, we the people, and we are calling on all of us to fight. Are you all ready to fight? It might be kind of cold. I didn't really hear you. Like, are you all ready to fight? But first, let's square up with reality, because honest to God, it's the first and the bravest thing that we can do in this moment. Before we do anything about our democracy, we have to fight our own despair, don't we? How many people have felt doubt? How many people have felt despondency? But how many people feel different now that we're all together here today? Because, my friends, I have seen personally in March after March what can be done when we harness our defiance. Are we defiant today?
We have marched more than 20 times and mobilized tens of millions of people since 2017. And you know what? At every one of those marches, most of the marchers were brand new to the movement. And afterwards, they went home to organize in their communities. So we're gonna talk about some of them for a second. We wanna talk about a group in Enid, Oklahoma. At Women's March, we call them our Oklahoma girlies.
Oklahoma City, which is just a few hours from where I live in Amarillo. And the voters there elected a white nationalist to the city council. And this was one of the J. Crew white supremacists who carried a tiki torch in Charlottesville. I mean, the cringe kind. Exactly. Wait, did you say about Charlottesville? I'm not sure. What'd you say about white supremacists? And just like y'all, the Oklahoma girlies were not having it. So they helped get the signatures they needed to recall him. They told their neighbors the truth about him. And their work led to his ouster from the city council in the red city in a red state. And if we can win there, we can win anywhere. Can I hear you shout them out?
Y'all, that is how we take down fascists.
Period.
We tell the truth. We rally the people. We don't ever give up, even when it seems impossible. We look out for one another. We lean on each other, and we keep giving them that work.
Welcome back to another episode of In Depth with Deon. In this episode, I speak with Tulsa's first Black mayor, Monroe Nichols, following his historic election win, and break down his ambitious agenda for the city's future. But first, the rundown. In local Tulsa news, Justice for Greenwood, an advocacy organization fighting for survivors and descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre, announced on Christmas Eve it had donated $21,000 to 13 Greenwood churches and Booker T. Washington High School. The school was one of the only structures to survive the city-sanctioned massacre. In Oklahoma news, Republican Governor Kevin Stitt has been facing backlash over his partnership with Denmark on renewable energy. The backlash has come from Republican Attorney General Gitner Drummond and State Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters, two men who are expected to run for governor themselves in 2026. In national news, as one of his final acts as president, Joe Biden has commuted the sentences of 37 out of 40 federal death row prisoners. The move largely deprives Trump of implementing an execution spree similar to his first term. And those are some of the headlines. This is In Depth with Deon. I'm your host, Deon Osborne, recording from Tulsa's historic Greenwood district. Monroe Nichols' victory as Tulsa's first Black mayor is more than symbolic. It's a historic moment in our city's journey towards equity and representation. And I'm so grateful to have Mayor Nichols joining us today on In Depth with Deon. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Look, I'm glad. I didn't even know if you were going to be free. I know you're so busy. You just got inaugurated recently, and you're already off, at event after event. So how's it been so far?
It's been good. The big thing has been making sure we're building a team that can deliver on the promises we made during the campaign. Also, getting to know the 3,500 people I now work with at the city of Tulsa. And so it's been good. You got some events you're doing, but a lot of it is in the office, doing the work of being mayor now while you're trying to build a team and establish a culture at City Hall. So it's been fun.
And it's only been what? How many days?
Just about a week and almost 2 weeks. So was inaugurated Monday of last week. So, second weekend, and we're hard at it, man. We're hard at it. It's fun. I mean, we still are a little ways off. I mean, the team won't be fully filled out in the mayor's office till after the first of the year. Actually, there's an appointment that's going to come today. We'll announce our director of tribal policy and partnerships today, which is going to be really exciting. Really good person who's gonna do that for us and for the city. We got some challenges ahead of us. We've had a court opinion on the O'Brien case with how you deal with some of these tribal citizen cases post McGirt. We got the same challenges we talked about on the campaign trail, everything from affordable housing to homelessness to education and public safety. So, but we're working on all those things, man. So it's just, you get into it. It's like chopping wood, you just got to get after it.
Okay. And I want to get into the nitty gritty of the policies.
Yeah.
But first, I want to just kind of have a bird's eye view, right? You won as Tulsa's first Black mayor.
Yeah.
It's a nonpartisan race, of course, but you won as a Democrat in a state that is the only state, I believe, where every single county on the federal level voted for Donald Trump for president 3 times.
Yeah.
There's some counties here in Tulsa, in East and South Tulsa, that you won at the same time that Trump won by over 60%.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Yeah, the precincts where we had overlap, where we did really, really well, where President-elect Trump did well. I think it was a matter of just going and talking to people, man. The one thing I think we often forget as we turn over these presidential administrations, there are some folks who voted for Barack Obama in 2008, 2012, who turned around and voted for Donald Trump in 2016.
Right.
There are some folks who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 that turned around and voted for Joe Biden in 2020. So there are some folks who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 who turned around and voted for Donald Trump in 2024. And I think some of that is things that, decisions that people make based on national politics and, however they're making those decisions based on who they like and don't like at the time.
Yeah.
But I think the core of it is a lesson in engage people, talk to people, hear their issues, hear their stories, have that reflected in what you're offering them as someone who's going to, try to get a job, make their city better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. So if somebody was a Trump supporter, it didn't in any way, shape, or form reduce my enthusiasm to talk to them about the future of the city than it did if they were a Joe Biden or Kamala Harris supporter, for example. It's like, how are we going to build a city? Because the pitch that I made is that no matter who you're voting for, post-election, Air Force One, whether it's carrying President Trump or it's carrying President Harris, is not going to land at Tulsa International Airport and come solve homelessness. It's not going to come here and address our affordable housing shortage. It's not going to address public safety issues. They're going to handle the DC issues that are happening here, and that's important. The state level, they're going to handle issues at the state. We've got to come together as a community and address these problems that we have in Tulsa. And if we don't, we're going to be a community that's going to be less and less viable over time. And we'll go make that case. And that's the case we made. I think that's why we did well.
Okay. And I want to get into some of those policies that you've highlighted throughout the campaign. You were endorsed by former mayors. You were endorsed by the Tulsa World.
Yeah.
And
Black Wall Street Times.
And the Black Wall Street Times,
yes,
the most important one.
Yeah.
Talk about why you felt they endorsed you. I know that one of the things that the Tulsa World mentioned was how you were the only candidate that had a fully fleshed out plan with actionable steps behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those endorsements came because, my campaign was not a vote for me because you like me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a vote for me because I've been around for a long time. It was really about, let's look to the future of this community. Let's think about the challenges we're facing. And if we're having an honest conversation about those challenges, do we think we can afford to have anybody who doesn't have a plan for how we address them? And I think that's why I got those endorsements. So everybody from folks who had done the job before, former mayors, that kind of thing, to folks who have watched, reporting the news as things have happened over the years here. I think what you found was folks who were like, yeah, we got to have a better direction forward. And I started the campaign in July of 2023 talking about that better way forward in very specific ways. A lot of people tell you, oh, voters don't care about policies and plans and all that kind of stuff. But what we offered in the campaign and what we're offering as an administration is, the stories we heard, the frustrations we heard, the solutions that we heard, make those part of how we move forward. So it's not like these abstract issues or anything like that. It's the things that people see. It's the things that people experience. And it's also finding ways in which citizens can have some agency in helping solve those problems. And that's what the campaign was about. So it turned into less of a, we made the case that it wasn't about Monroe Nichols and Karen Keith. It was about homelessness. It was about affordable housing. It was about making this the safest big city in the country. It was about how we're going to work with tribal nations. And if it's about those things, well, then the decision becomes easier. And that's how you take, a campaign that a lot of people early on didn't think was going to be successful, and you turn into an 11-point victory on election day that nobody saw coming.
Fair enough. Let's get into some of those agenda items.
Yeah.
I want to start with homelessness and affordable housing.
Yeah.
The point in time counts that we do every year has shown that homelessness has increased year over year here in the city. So what is happening to address that, and what can we expect in the coming months?
Yeah, so really excited about, the work that we already kind of have going underway. Emily Hall is, I appointed her senior advisor to the mayor on the issue of homelessness, because we don't really have great infrastructure at the city on like how we are taking every department and deploying it to address this issue. Everything from, our inability to have gotten a low barrier shelter stood up, our inability to actually have dedicated beds for folks who are out on the streets right now. So as we think about decommissioning encampments in a responsible and compassionate way, and then also having all that coordinated with service providers. Now we have some pockets of excellence. Like, I always say we do have really, really good service providers here who are trying to meet the need of the folks on the streets. We don't have a system though that's changing outcomes. And so that's why you got folks who will come, they can get some services at different service providers, but they are still chronically homeless.
Yeah.
Right. So a couple of things are on the horizon in the kind of short to medium term. One is, right now our team is looking at our opioid settlement dollars that we have at the city currently, and making some commitments on doubling down on things like increasing the alternative response teams so we can more quickly respond to challenges that we specifically see downtown for now, but build a model for how we do it citywide. So where that is, either, hot spotted or 24 hours a day, because we know mental health issues don't run on a clock.
Right.
But we also know as we think about, how we're bringing so many people downtown every single day, how are we making sure that, we're addressing issues that pop up. Some people have substance abuse issues. Some people have mental health, behavioral health issues. Some people just need some support and some help.
Mhm.
Those alternative response teams are going to help us make sure we can meet that need and get folks where they need to be and where they need to go. Additionally, we're working right now with a number of partners actually on some locations, our assets that we have at the city. So every building that we have that we're not using, every building that TPS has, for example, if they're not using, the county, like really looking at our assets and say, like, what are some places that we could, actually have a space where we could, in a very comfortable way, make sure folks have a place to go. One thing I get concerned about every night is how cold it gets and people sleeping outside. Like I think about it before I go to bed every night. I think about it every single night. I mean, and that is the truth. So getting that set, so we have places for people to go from a low barrier standpoint. But when we get the res care facility, this is more of a medium term deal. When that residential care facility is online, it won't be a low barrier shelter per se. It'll actually be a place where we start the encampment decommissioning work. So like as we go out and we start to notice that, this spot where people might be sleeping and all that kind of stuff, they can no longer do that there. There's an offer of services, and we're not going to arrest anybody, right? It's just like, you can't sleep here anymore. And if you want to take up a service, we'll get you to the res care facility. We'll get you coordinated. That plan is going to, be a plan coordinated with the housing authority to make sure we have enough in the way of housing vouchers. We actually are getting ready to work with those opioid funds to maybe open up some additional hotel rooms in places. So like we're getting really aggressive about getting people off the street in really responsible ways. So that plan is kind of medium term. How do we respond right now using opioid dollars to increase alternative response, get people in hotel rooms, get them off the street type deal, get them served, right, with our service providers. And then as we move forward, having more dedicated facilities where we can put all that stuff on site in one place and we can quickly get people what they need. Because the idea is that people don't sit in shelters forever. Like right. We get them to transitional and then permanent housing as quickly as possible. And so you got that part. Now, the medium to longer term deal, when I say medium longer term, I'm thinking, what does it look like 8, 12 months and beyond? Yesterday morning, we kicked off an awesome partnership with the Housing Partnership Network, which is the prominent national expert on affordable housing, developing affordable housing. And right now we're going to have, I think, 3 of the biggest affordable housing developers also working with our affordable housing developers here in this community to meet that goal of 6,000 affordable units by 2028. And that work's going to start here in very short order. So what you're about to see is the most massive expansion in affordable housing in the history of the city, while also the largest public response to addressing homelessness in our city's history. I committed to getting to functional zero by 2030. We're absolutely going to get that done. And that work is already underway, and we're already getting ready to spend money to start making it happen.
Okay, I hear you. Yeah. Short term, medium term, long term plans already in place.
Yeah.
Let's move to public safety.
Yeah.
You highlighted how you want to reimagine public safety while also making sure that places like downtown and other hotspots for crime, those issues can be resolved.
Yeah.
In a city like Tulsa, where we have a history of divisions, especially racial divisions, community divisions, when it comes to what public safety and law enforcement looks like.
Yeah.
How do you square those two, and what does reimagining public safety look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is bridging the gap in a lot of ways. So, first of all, when I was campaigning, we talked about making this the safest big city in the country, and a couple very specific things we talked about. One was, there's obviously an enforcement component to that. Law enforcement is a critical piece, and we know that there are challenges everywhere when it comes to law enforcement. But what we also know is there's folks who serve on the force who put their lives in danger every day. And, we got to make sure we're, fulfilling our responsibility to make that job as safe as it possibly can be. And also, deploy our resources so we get really the minority kind of criminal element off the street to allow for communities to have a shot to really be safe over time. Right. So like, how are we deploying our resources at the department to get violent criminals off the street, but then also to have this really balanced approach to how we invest in communities. So this affordable housing stuff we're talking about, right? That's part of revitalizing communities. That helps us reduce crime, right? That helps. When we talk about our obligation to children and youth in this community, our ability to have, high impact tutor and after school programs and opportunities for kids, that lowers the instances of crime. Us getting really serious about rape kit testing, which we just announced just this week, a total of $3 million that's going to help us in the backlog on rape kit testing to get, folks who frankly have been rapists off the streets, but also invested in things like, the gang unit, narcotics, things like that, because these things are out on the streets. That's absolutely true. So we got that enforcement part right. But the other part of it is our obligation as a city to invest in these communities, because that's the only way you keep crime down. We are asking the police department, in my opinion anyway, to fight a losing battle until we fulfill our obligation of investing in communities. And some of that's just bridging the gap. And so one of the ways that we're working to do that, after the first of the year, we'll actually have a kind of a committee on community safety. So thinking about the other ways in which we need to be addressing crime in communities. And my goal is that we shift some power, and so that neighborhoods are able to have a little more in the way of self-determination as to what their neighborhood looks like, how the city invests in them, how the city experiences them. And that starts with this neighborhood conditions index that we have at the city. So we've taken every neighborhood, and this is work that predated me. I give Mayor Bynum and his administration credit for this. So they've taken every neighborhood and they've scored them basically between 1 and 3. So a priority 1 neighborhood is a neighborhood that has significant challenges, just as a back of the napkin deal. And it's all, you can look online, you can look at the neighborhood conditions index. We're going to take an aggressive approach to taking all the priority 1 neighborhoods and saying, what do we have to do to invest to get from these priority 1s and move them to like a priority 2? So that means all the things. That means it's not just the city, but it's also the schools. It means it's the schools and higher education and Tulsa Tech. We have to deliver from an accountability standpoint on how we're investing in people and communities, and that's how we reduce crime. And so, the road to becoming the safest big city in the country goes through, taking care of the criminal element. That is just part of it. And I would argue that's the smallest part of it. The biggest part of it is making sure we're making these investments, because if we know and we don't do anything, well, that's on us. And now we know what we need to be investing in. We know we have to be investing in economic opportunity, in housing, in education, in workforce development, and in infrastructure. And that is a job of the city. That's actually that's a job of the police department. And so we got to do our job now.
That makes me think of the first 48. One of the things I see a lot on social media when people mention Tulsa is either the Tulsa Race Massacre or the hit show.
I've actually told people, as I said, guys, if we did a poll about Tulsa, people are going to know 2 things about us, like First 48 and Tulsa Race Massacre. They don't know about Route 66 right now.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's so much good happening, revitalization, resurgence of entrepreneurship, for 100%. Instance. How do we change the perception of Tulsa?
I got to say, and this is something that I think it caught me off guard a little bit on election night, because there were so many feelings about the national environment. This election actually, I think, had a lot of people around the country looking at Tulsa a little bit different because of what they thought about us. Because we know our community is different. We know we got those things that are challenges as well, right? So we're not ignorant to those things. But I think everybody else, had another look and say, oh, wait, I thought the town was something different. Well, how'd they elect that dude? And so I think people are now intrigued. They're like, well, what else do I not know about this community? Oh, they're becoming a beast in entrepreneurship, as you said. As we look at this state that seems very homogenous from a political standpoint, there's actually some diversity there, right? So I think what is starting to happen and what will happen, continue to happen if we continue to make these strides and all these things we talk about delivering on, we're like, well, that is an interesting place. So now we know about the race massacre. Well, learn more about Greenwood there. We know that this was like the oil capital of the world. Whoa, my goodness, this city is a large city in the country that's all Indian reservation. Well, that's kind of interesting to me too. There's so many unique things about Tulsa that people are starting to come and realize. And I think that the perception that we have is kind of like a back of the napkin deal, right? People see what they see on TV. I think people are going to start to see us as a really strong model here pretty soon about how you solve social problems, because we're committed to doing that at the city and with a lot of partners, but also how you really take some of these kind of, investable ideas in the entrepreneurship space and you build something great again. And we become like this community that has its origins in entrepreneurship, whether that was oil capital world stuff or the legacy of the Greenwood district. It was all coming here to a place that nobody else wanted and saying, oh, we made something that nobody thought we could make. That's always been our story. And I think that's about to be our story again.
Okay. Now I want to hang on to the Greenwood district.
Yeah.
There's been so many efforts in recent years to provide some form of justice to the survivors, especially, but also the descendants in the community at large. You have on the federal level, senators are preparing to vote on giving Oklahoma its first national monument, which would be the Greenwood Black Wall Street National Monument. You have the city of Tulsa, which is conducting its own reparations commission right now, looking at housing policy. You made a point of really elevating the survivors in your inauguration speech. Why was that important to you? And what plans do you have to provide justice for these survivors?
Why it was important to me. Like, I think about Mother Randall, who was there on December the 2nd.
110 years old.
110 years old. I went to her birthday party, 2 of her birthday parties actually. And I thought about this amazing arc in history. And so during the campaign, I read a book called The Last of the Lions. It's by Clarence Jones. And Clarence Jones was one of the guys who was a advisor for Martin Luther King, helped write the I Have a Dream speech. And Clarence Jones, his story starts, I think, in Philadelphia, and he went to a boarding school for colored and Indian boys, I think. And then he was the first Black allied member of the New York Stock Exchange, did stuff with Martin Luther King. But he writes this book about like his life and how much the country changed. And, in some ways, him being around for like, what it was like for Black folks when he was younger, this great moment of movement and change, how many of those mover and changers died, and then him living to see, seeing the election of the first Black president. Just like this arc where he got to watch history change. And I thought about this with Mother Randall in particular at the inauguration. I think about somebody who, when she was, I believe, 6 years old for her 7th birthday, was forced out of her community due to the race massacre, which is, I think is fair to say is the, probably the greatest single act of racial violence in our country's history, individual event, so take out Indian removal, all that kind of stuff, an individual event. From that, at 6 years old, to now even making it 110, making it to 110, 103 years after the race massacre, seeing the inauguration of the first Black mayor of that same city, like the unlikelihood from what she saw in her first memories potentially of Tulsa and what it's like now at 110 years old, is she still has the ability to know and understand and to internalize that. What an amazing arc that is, right? And what that means not just to me, but what that means to us as a community. And this idea too that we should take from that, it wasn't that long ago because somebody's still around,
right?
But also just I think about that 6-year-old, and I think about that now 110-year-old and kind of what that means. And so like I highlight that because I just think it's just it is an amazing kind of almost not necessarily a passing of the baton, but it's just like an amazing thing to kind of reflect on, just on somebody's life. And it kind of gives me chills a little bit. On the
history.
Yeah. I mean, and then on the justice side, I have spent a lot of time. I was in Evanston last week when there was a symposium on reparations in Evanston. They've done all the stuff around housing. I think they were a model for what the Beyond the Apology Commission had worked on. So I was there this last week, and kind of going through the recommendations of the Beyond the Apology Commission has been really interesting. I think we have to act on those. I mean, I think I'm really interested in acting on those. I think for the survivors themselves, though, like, you know, I've had some conversations about, you know, what do we need to do there? Like, I'll be honest, when it comes to descendants, I think, you know, what Beyond the Apology is doing, maybe there's something there. So, but I do have an eye toward what should we be doing, particularly for Mother Randall, Mother Fletcher. And I don't necessarily have that answer yet, but it is something that I'm working on, because I think that there is something that has to be beyond symbolism for those two women in particular.
Yeah.
I think as we think about how do we build community, how do we do stuff for descendants moving forward, I think there's a lot of different great examples of it. Everything from, and this is just, you know, I've just given a list actually of things that we can consider doing at the city. Everything from, like, you know, bidding preferences for companies that are owned by descendants, like things like, there's all those types of things, you know, obviously the housing stuff and Beyond the Apology. So for me, the one thing that I was committed to, since we had a community process and we've had a lot of people digging into it, not to make a unilateral decision on reparations, but to talk about the folks who are most impacted. I remind people all the time, I'm a Black man who's a Tulsan, who's mayor. I'm not a descendant of victims of the massacre. And so I think, just like everybody else who's not as impacted by it, I think I have to, you know, make sure I know my place, know my role, and listen to the people who are. And that's been the stance that I've taken throughout this process.
Well, I will say, I respect that stance.
Yeah.
It's already further of a stance than previous administrations over the last century.
Yeah.
And I think, just from my own personal perspective, I think that's the right track, because internationally, reparations has several components. And one of the most important components is listening to the people most impacted of how they can best be healed.
That's right.
And so I definitely think that that's the right way to go.
Yeah.
You'll definitely be getting, you know, pressure from folks to do something, because
and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
And, you know, that leads me to one of my other questions. I want to get to tribal sovereignty, but don't you have to be, like, just a little bit crazy to want to take this job on, you know, especially considering Black folks, we are the biggest critics out there.
Yeah. That's okay. I mean, like, I think...
are you ready for that?
You know, I've been in the legislature for 8 years now. Before that, I was, you know, basically every job I had was relatively in the public eye. You know, a student athlete before that. So I'm used to places where you get highly criticized. And I think it's important that everybody is part of this process of holding leaders accountable. And I always say, sometimes that also extends to your friends. And you got to understand, we're in this knowing that we have an opportunity as a community. And that opportunity, at least for this administration, as best we know, like, you got a chance to run for election, but you got 4 years. And sometimes if you have someone in office who you think is someone who's inclined to get stuff done, well, then you push. I mean, you know, because you don't know if the next person is going to have that same attitude about it. So, like, I don't take it personal. I don't take it personal at all. I think that it's an awesome obligation to lead this community. I think you also know, with all the community trauma over the years, the degree of difficulty is really high. And if I'm being honest, one of the reasons why I ran when a lot of people didn't think I could win is I didn't trust anybody else to do it well. We're about to go into a time in our community where it's going to take a mayor who's going to have to help unify this community. And at the end of it, I may be the least popular out of everybody. But if we can hold together as best we can, and we can have the conversations that need to be had, and we come out on the back end of this and we can deliver on being a better community than we were walking into it, that's a success. That's a success. And I don't think it's being fearful to talk about issues. I won an election because I was willing to talk about it. I won elections. I was willing to make commitments on things. I'm going to be a mayor that does the same thing. And I think having critics who look like me or who don't look like me is totally fine. It is well within their right. I work for 411,000 people right now, and they all deserve a voice in what happens. And I think that's my obligation over the next 4 years.
Fair enough. Last question, tribal sovereignty.
Yeah.
You've expressed taking a different approach to previous administrations when it comes to respecting this government to government relationship, right? We have the former mayor who, initiated a lawsuit, a legal battle for jurisdiction in criminal cases. We have a state governor who has basically who he has called tribal sovereignty a threat against the state of Oklahoma. And you have expressed wanting to work with our tribal partners. And you mentioned yourself, Tulsa is the largest major city in the nation that's in tribal land. So what is your approach to respecting that government to government relationship?
Yeah.
And how do we move past these legal issues?
Yeah, I mean, I actually believe the legal issues aren't as tough as we make them to be. I think it starts with just, what kind of MOUs we need in place when we're thinking about how we prosecuting cases, right? Because that's what it boils down to. Once somebody is arrested, who is prosecuting X, Y, and Z case to make sure that justice is served. When I say justice is served, not just to the public, but that the person who has been arrested gets due process and, those types of things, right?
Right.
And I think you can fight that battle, in the court of law. I think you also can come up with really good solutions, not going to court, not these court battles. I said before, and I'll say it again, I don't believe that you can support tribal sovereignty when it's convenient. I think you're on one side of the fence or on the other side of the fence. And for me, I think about as someone who comes from a community of people who have had a lot of broken promises over the years, I can identify with tribal citizens and tribal leaders with broken promises, right? Like all of us communities of color know about that, right? And I'm not going to be somebody who's going to break that promise, but also I think there's a lot more in the way of positive things we can do together. I saw just yesterday, the Cherokee Nation, I don't know the details on it, $2 million in affordable housing for North Tulsa that they're getting ready to spend. When the governor decided not to take the summer feeding programs, the tribes did, which meant any kid who was in school on the reservation, tribal or not, could get access to those resources. So we can deal with the legal and technical challenges, but imagine if we showed the kind of respect, reverence, and partnership with tribes, what that means for this community. And so for me, I'm thinking, man, if we can figure out traffic tickets and how to prosecute people, that's all I got to do. And we can get all this other stuff on the back end, and we can make this a place that is the center of tribal culture, just like we can do it as it relates to Black entrepreneurship, just like we can do it when it comes to innovation more generally, that Tulsa can become this place just by us, making sure we're, basically doing our part to keep the promises of this country. Everybody from around the world can say, look at this melting pot of cultures that's getting it right, respecting all the treaties and all that kind of stuff that came before us in a way that's appropriate in a local place. And they figured out how to do it all together, notwithstanding what the governor does, notwithstanding what previous administrations have done, for whatever reasons that they've done them, right? Even if there's good intentions, imagine the things that we can do together. And that's really what we're focused on right now. I mentioned, our director of tribal policy and partnerships is going to be announced today. That'll be a person who will officially take on their role January 29th. But that is all designed for us to do exactly what I promised to do, to co-govern with our tribal nations, to make sure we're doing everything we can that for the part of their reservations that Tulsa occupies, that it is the very best with the most possibilities for young natives, for older natives, and that we're coming together to deliver for people all across the city. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Mayor Nichols, you got a lot of plans, and it looks like you're taking action to turn them into a reality. So we're looking forward to seeing how we can help support making Tulsa a better city.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having us.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For this week's Community Spotlight, I spoke with Tevin Foster, a former pro basketball player who created a youth sports camp in his hometown of Lawton, Oklahoma. Hear what he had to say.
These teams in Dallas and these good organizations, AAU programs, these kids is playing all year long, bro. Like when you go to Texas, they got leagues all year long. These kids is grinding, they playing, they getting the game reps. They're not just training. So if we can get these kids to play more games and get into more leagues out here in Lawton, keep their minds off other things, you know what I mean? then we'll start winning more championships. Then we'll start seeing more teams prosper at wherever they go, out of town, Texas, all the big cities that put on those big tournaments. But when you go ask them, they playing all year round, bro. So that's my vision with this league that we put on. But like I'm learning also that it's never too good. It's never too good for some people. Like you never gonna be perfect. Somebody always gonna complain, bro. But that's where I go back to say, I don't. If you're doing something for the kids and it's genuine love and you mean it, bro, I'm all for it. Like I'll never say that about the Impact League or the Play Long League. I want those teams. I want every team in our league to play in those leagues. You get what I mean? Because it takes a village to build this community up. It can't just be one person, bro. Like it ain't just me. It's everybody. If you're doing it the right way for the right reasons, and people gonna know, parents gonna know. That's why it went from 1 to 120. You know what I mean? Parents feel that, bro, for their kids, because ain't nobody finna just throw their kid to anybody.
Thank you, Tevin, for sharing your story. It's so impactful. This week for Mike Up, I went to TikTok to learn what some Oklahomans have to say about State Superintendent Ryan Walters' plans to change education curriculum standards. Check it out.
You want religion in the schools? You want the Bible in the schools? I want the IRS in the church. We are not the same.
We 100% should not bring the Bible back in schools. What's that thing in the First Amendment? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion to express whatever religion you want. So if you were to bring Christianity back into schools, then you would have to bring every other one too. Even though at one point America was predominantly considered like a Christian nation, bro. Either way, bro, we have freedom of religion. If you were to bring that back in school, that would be disregarding that First Amendment, bro. Because you would be forcing us to, say we have a Bible class where we had to pray, we had to learn about God, and it was like a preacher in there. Bro, that's totally going against the First Amendment, because you forcing us into that religion, bro, because it's school. We got to do it. Especially if you made it a grade, then we got to learn the Bible scriptures, and we got to pray, and we got to do all this. Unless we brought the Bible back in schools as a learning tool, to just study religion. I feel like we should bring religion into school, religion in general, to study it. It's a lot of good philosophies in there. There's a lot of people that need to read that, bro. But to force it upon us, as in, you have to follow this religion, we teaching it in school, totally against the First Amendment, dude. Common sense.
That's all for now. Watch In Depth with Deon on YouTube, the Black Wall Street Times, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Subscribe to In Depth with Deon on Patreon for exclusive and behind-the-scenes content. Our podcast is presented by the Black Wall Street Times. Special thanks to producer Jesse Ulrich. I'm Deon Osborne. See you next time.